Chapter 637 to 639. After obtaining the sample of Deidara's cells, Tsukihi returned to a nearby location with no one present in the immediate vicinity. There she transferred the soul back to the main, and then Kuroto, after making sure that no one was watching him, activated the Tenseigan chakra mode and quickly made his way towards Angkor Vantian, the floating fortress, Amatsukami Organization's current unofficial base, and Kuroto's main laboratory. Oh, and Gaara and Karin's current home. Kuroto-sama, welcome back. As soon as Kuroto returned to the fortress, he was greeted by the excited Karin and cheerful Gaara, both of whom greeted him respectfully. Noticing the two kids, Kuroto's thoughts halted for a moment. Immediately his figure disappeared from his position, and as it secretly arrived in front of Gaara, he threw a punch at Gaara. Gaara instinctively leapt back. At the same time, sand around him gathered and took the form of a small sand shield that tried to block Kuroto's fist. Bang! Lo and behold, it actually succeeded. Kuroto's fist met the small sand shield and came to a sudden stop as a low, muffled sound echoed in the passageway. It felt like I am hitting an iron wall. That's progress, he muttered, with a surprised expression. His words were genuine, as he was really surprised that the momentum that his fist carried completely disappeared as his hand struck the sand shield. In the punch just now, although Kuroto had used only about 5 to 10% of his physical strength, that too without using any chakra amplification, without a doubt, even this much strength is higher than the best punch of a typical mid-rank chunin, and for Gaara, who is only a kid at this point, this punch was still quite heavy, yet he was able to block it with perfect reaction and timings. Speaks volume of the hard work he is doing and the improvements he has done. What surprised Kuroto more is that Gaara's sand-controlling ability has also improved, therefore the amount of sand he is able to easily lift, and the speed with which he can move all the sand around him has also increased. It must not be forgotten that the shukaku in Gaara's body has been completely sealed by Kuroto, so no form of communication or help or guidance is possible through it, and even in this situation, if Gaara is now able to control sand to this extent without feeling any strain, it can only mean that he has been training really hard in the past few months. For doing hard work, the least he deserves is praise, and Kuroto didn't want to take away this right from Gaara. Therefore, he did what he should do. He smiled, then retracted his hand and praised Gaara. Very good. From your reaction and the perfect time at which you blocked my fist, I can see that you haven't been lazying around in my absence. Gaara, who has rarely been praised by anyone, blushed in embarrassment and said while scratching his hair shyly, Kuroto-sama, you are praising me too much. I haven't yet done anything praiseworthy. Kuroto smiled slightly and said nothing in reply. Internally, he was evaluating Gaara's current strength in comparison to other kids his age. Since Shukaku has been sealed, so losing control over himself is no longer a possibility, although this increases the chances of dying in the worst situation. Nonetheless, his analysis ability and dependence on Shukaku has also disappeared. And from the speed and with which he is reacting and defending against the attacks, his current strength should be at the level of a low-level chunin, which is not much different from the strength of Uchiha Sasuke, now that I think about it. But if a battle is conducted between the two, the chances of Sasuke winning the battle are slightly higher. This is obviously because of Sasuke's Sharingan and better battle analytical ability, which Gaara's mind has yet to develop. Even without the power of Shukaku, Gaara is one of the most talented children in this era, so there shouldn't have been much difference between Sasuke and Gaara's strength. It's just that Sasuke has experienced the humiliation of losing to Kimimaro in the presence of the entire village, which resulted in the awakening of his Sharingan, and later he has also undergone Shinichi's brutal combat training that gave him quite a lot of combat experience. So he might be able to outwit Gaara and manage to win against him at this point in time, but otherwise, both of them should have the relatively same strength, and it would be a tough toe-to-toe battle. But all of this doesn't matter now. What's important is that Gaara is making progress and improving at a faster speed compared to what Kuroto had expected and planned, and that's all that matters. After reviewing Gaara's progress, he turned his head and looked at Karin, who was standing on the side. Seeing that Kuroto's attention was on her, Karin hurriedly said, "Kuroto-sama, I have mastered all the seals you have taught me until now. I have also finished my homework, and you can see for yourself, I have also lost a lot of weight." Kuroto held his chin and nodded after observing Karin's body. "That's true indeed." Karin proudly folded her hands over her chest and said, "You see, I am also not lazing around, and I too am training extremely hard so that I can be useful to you." Kuroto nodded towards her. "Very good. I have high expectations from you." "Yes." Karin nodded excitedly. There was no need to think much about Karin. Amongst all the kunoichi in the training of her age, she is undoubtedly the strongest at this point. No one, almost no one can match her. In fact, even in the history of all the kunoichi, perhaps only Tsunade Haim might have had such strength when she was so young. So, Kuroto wasn't all that worried about Karin's growth. Karin's uzumaki background already gave her ample potential. Now all she has to do is realize it, and she would undoubtedly become one of the strongest kunoichi in the history of the entire shinobi world. Kuroto smiled, then thought of something, and said, "Both of you, train well. After I feel that both of you have good enough strength, I will take the two of you to gain practical experience, and also let both of you understand what a real genius is like." Both Gaara and Karin nodded. "We will do our best to not let you down." With that, Kuroto left the two kids to their devices and the Kazakage puppet watching over them and made his way towards his laboratory. As soon as he entered his main laboratory, Kuroto looked at the neatly arranged new devices and machinery with an excited expression. This is the result of his hard work. Recently, he has used a lot of funds from his pockets in buying new equipment. The hundreds of millions of Ryo that a person can't even spend in his lifetime, Kuroto spent it all in just a few days. Previously, almost all the machinery in his laboratory was second-hand, but now that's no longer the case. Since Amatsukami has become the strongest organization in the shinobi world, a lot of secret channels that weren't previously open to Amatsukami have now opened up, and Kuroto used all these channels to completely upgrade his laboratory. The result of doing all this is that today, Kuroto's laboratory is no inferior to that of Danzo's laboratory, and he is going to use all these machines to complete his project godhood. Kuroto went to the cell incubation chamber to start the preliminary processing of Deidara's cells after admiring his freshly updated laboratory for a while. He then gathered the processed cells and began the activation phase for Deidara's cells in the newly purchased incubator. Kuroto changed the cell fusion process after a lot of research and practice. Instead of performing the cell fusion process directly, he added a few extra steps before the final cell fusion to improve the viability of the cells, and only performs the cell fusion when the viability of two cells is the highest. Using this approach offers various advantages, including an increase of at least 3% in cell fusion success. Don't underestimate this 3% boost in success rate. It may appear insignificant at first, but as the number of experimental efforts approaches thousands or hundreds of thousands, there will always be some successful cases, no matter how diametrically opposed two cells are in nature. And that's not all. This 3% increase in success rate not only saves money and time, but it also enhances the overall grade of the cell generated after the fusion, which has a number of benefits, including improved physique, increased chakra reserves, greater byakugan quality, and so on. Kuroto would have an easier time developing the clone if the grade was higher. Kuroto's Fujin clone is an example of this predicament. The Fujin clone he now employs suffered from genetic mutation and regression. As a result, It outperformed Kuroto's expectations, and there was no need to further develop or train it. In fact, it exceeded Kuroto's expectations to the point where he had to continue developing the Suijin clone and the Homusubi clone in order to keep all of the clones balanced. As a result, the new stages that have been included are extremely advantageous to him. Let's get back to the task at hand now that we've clarified the improved method. According to my estimates, the final success rate of the cell fusion is 4%, mumbled Kuroto, frowning as he examined the computed result in front of him. The additional stages he has included can boost the success rate by 3%, but the final success rate calculated is only 4%, which is far too low. And this low result clearly indicates that Deidara's cell tissues are incompatible with Kuroto's cells. Kuroto's cell tissues and Deidara's cell tissues are only marginally more compatible than Kuroto's cells with the Uchiha clan's cells. This is also quite understandable. Kuroto's cells reflect the Hyuga clan, which has a mild and tranquil chakra nature, but Deidara's cells represent a very violent and unstable chakra nature, hence it's only natural that their cells aren't particularly compatible. Fortunately, he has improved the technique so that the fundamental success rate of the fusion has increased, and he no longer has to struggle in an infinite circle of failure, as he did with the Uchiha clan cells. Deidara's cell tissues are already highly vigorous and don't need to be cultivated for very long, because his body is in a developmental stage. As a result, after setting the incubation duration on the cell incubator, Kuroto gently exited the cell incubator room. Kuroto's gaze instinctively fell on the long row of brand-new huge nutrition troughs in front of him as he walked out of the cultivation chamber. He recently purchased all of these big nutrient tanks. These new nutrition tanks have higher performance and are more stable than previous ones. Because he had so much money, Kuroto got rid of all the old large-scale nutrient tanks in the lab and bought 16 of the most modern large-scale nutrition tanks in the ninja world all at once. 6 of them will be utilized to store the clones of the 6 chakra natures. He prepped the remaining 10 for the cultivation of the other clones. He won't have to cultivate 2 clones at a time like in the past. With these 10 new huge nutrient tanks, he will now be able to complete 10 clones at a time, and the larger the base, the more likely fine products will emerge. In the future, he will be able to carefully select among 10 clones and choose the best clone for further development. With these thoughts in mind, Kuroto proceeded to check the condition of the Suijin clone and the Fujin clone. The Suijin clone is stable and there are no abnormalities, and the deterioration of the Fujin clone has been controlled after exchange transfusion treatment, but the effect of exchange blood therapy will become more and more poor based on the analysis of the data detected by the instrument. One blood change may last a month the first few times, but after a few times, one blood change may only last 20 days or even less, and this duration will continue to decrease with each change. In other words, the Fujin clone has its limits, even if the cost of exchange blood treatment is vigorously spent to preserve it. It's difficult for Kuroto to estimate how long this limit will last at the moment. It could be 2 to 3 years or even 4 to 5 years. In other words, his wind chakra nature clone will always remain in danger of becoming a piece of scrap before his biotechnology advances further. Sigh. He can only sigh helplessly, because he has no alternatives to provide in this situation. Kuroto left the laboratory and returned to the village after a long day. Back in Konoha. After quietly replacing the shadow clone in the principal's office, Kuroto briefly recalled the shadow clone's memories of the past 2 days. Everything went as usual during his absence of 2 days, and nothing major occurred. As usual, Naruto challenged Sasuke in the academy, but was defeated by Sasuke. Sasuke's adversary has an extra face, which is the only difference. This new adversary is not someone else. It is the Jinchuriki of Nanabi, Fu from the Takigakure who has recently arrived in Konoha, and the outcome is self-evident. Fu has not gained control over the Nanabi, and considering the fact that she isn't allowed to reveal her status as a Jinchuriki without the help of Nanabi, she, like Naruto, was easily defeated by Sasuke. Fu, on the other hand, has a demeanor that is quite similar to Naruto's. She has a carefree and laid-back personality. Therefore, even if she was defeated by Sasuke, she wasn't all that sad about it, and after becoming a loser who challenged Sasuke. Naruto, Rock Lee, Sai, and other kids became friends with her. As a result, she too became an official member of the Losers League. Kuroto grinned after reading all of the memories of his shadow clone. He shook his head with a chuckle, then put his hand on his chin in a thoughtful state. In actuality, because there are so many skilled faculty and staff in the academy, the principal, Hyuga Kuroto, is simply accountable for making general decisions and doesn't have any major role. Some of the things he has to do on a daily basis as a teacher are unimportant to him. In addition, he has already planned for a number of emergency circumstances. Preparation is key. Therefore, leaving a shadow clone in the school is sufficient to handle the majority of the ninja school's everyday operations. He stood up and walked up to the window, where he gazed at the raucous playground below and the students frolicking in it. For a brief while, Kuroto grumbled. Then he thought of something, and as a result, a group of faculty members assembled in the faculty room and held an impromptu meeting. Faculty room Kuroto gave the staff a sidelong glance and added, "I believe that educational advancement is still too slow. This isn't a playground, it's a ninja school. We need to work while keeping this in mind." When the instructors gathered around the meeting table and heard the remarks, they were taken aback. Kuroto actually advanced the teaching progress of this batch of kids a while ago. The course will be completed shortly if they continue to enhance the teaching progress. After all, the ninja school simply teaches the most fundamental techniques, as well as some basic ninja skills like tracking, patrolling, and hunting. Iluka inquired, "Kuroto-san, with our current teaching speed, the course that has to be completed in the entire duration will be completed within 2 years, which is already quite early, and if we further speed up the teaching speed, this duration will only decrease. So, what will the children do after that? Would they just graduate and become genin? But that is a bit. Some children are indeed capable of becoming genins at such a young age, but not everyone is. What about them?" Iluka's words were not just his. All of the faculty members' doubts were directed at the Hyuga mirror, and they looked at him for an answer. With a wave of his hand, Hyuga Kayami said, "Don't be concerned about these. I'll approach Hokage-sama and the other elders about adding some D-rank and C-rank ninjutsu to the Ninja Academy's scope." What? Everyone was caught aback by these words of Kuroto. Even in great shinobi villages like Konoha, there are few opportunities to learn ninjutsu. The majority of ninjas practice ninjutsu taught to them by their families and clans. This is why the ninjas from the ordinary villager background generally have no such resources with them. They have to fight multiple life-and-death battles and earn the right to learn a jutsu through merit. Aside from this, they can only learn ninjutsu from masters who are willing to teach their disciples. In short, on the basic matter of learning ninjutsu, ninjas with ordinary backgrounds have been far behind the ninjas with clan or family background, and that's why the starting line for the two parties become different, and so do future achievements. Several generations of Hokage have built a mentoring structure for all the children who aspire to be shinobi, and this is still the case. The civilian ninja will have no chance to acquire any ninjutsu if there is no mentoring structure created by multiple generations of Hokage. All of the clans agree on suppressing civilian ninjas and monopolizing ninjutsu resources. This is why just the most fundamental 3 basic ninjutsu is taught at the ninja school. If the ninja school allows children to learn D-rank and C-rank ninjutsu, it will have an impact not only on the affluent clan's interests, but also on the village's reward and punishment system. After all, several D-rank or C-rank ninjutsu are awarded to deserving village residents. These benefits will be less appealing if the institution teaches them for free. Will the village agree? Shisui wondered. Shisui knows how strongly Kuroto's idea will be resisted as a member of the Uchiha clan. Shisui is concerned that many people within the Hyuga clan, much alone the other shinobi clans, will resist this plan. You don't have to worry about this because I'll take care of it, Kuroto said after a brief pause. I'd like all pupils to study one of the 3 body techniques this month. The evaluation results will be posted on the bulletin board outside the school at the end of the month. In the future, this will be standard procedure. A test will be held once a month, and the results will be posted on the notice board outside each time. Guy's expression shifted as he considered something and said, Is it essential to be that strict? If these students don't want to be the last of their class and session, Kuroto said with a smile, they'll have to work hard, which is precisely what I expect from them. Guy approached Kuroto after the meeting and said, Kuroto, are you taking revenge? Kuroto seemed somewhat perplexed as he questioned, What do you mean? I won't say anything about the test next month, that's good, Guy remarked. But what about the method of announcing results, which is to post them on the school's notice board? Isn't it going to be too much? The entire village will be aware of the results using this way. Kuroto's perplexity persisted, and he said, So, once more, have you considered the feelings of individuals who rank last and are not very talented? Guy asked nervously. No one knows better than us about the feelings of people who rank last, Kuroto stated, placing his hand on Guy's shoulder. However, I also believe that this is the only way to motivate these children. How will they survive in conflicts if they can't handle such minimal pressure? Where would their incentive to develop come from if there is no pressure on their shoulders? Hearing Kuroto's explanation, Guy felt that it was reasonable. Although you are right, however. He used to rank among the top few from the downward order when he was a student in the ninja academy. He felt pressure at the time, but he was never overwhelmed, and he worked harder because he wanted to overcome Kakashi, the true kid who used to rank at the very top from the upward order. It was this notion that he worked harder and trained more arduously than everyone else. At the end of the day, all of his hard work and sweat paid off, and he is now who he is. As a result, he acknowledges that being under pressure isn't always a terrible thing. But, at that time, the Second Great Shinobi War had just finished. Significant battles between nations were raging, and the Third Great Shinobi War was about to begin. Thus, the pressure was required to motivate the students at the academy, Guy said, shaking his head. So, you appear to be forgetting something, Guy, Kuroto interjected before Guy could finish his sentence. Isn't now wartime, too? Or is it possible that the Akatsuki organization does not pose a threat to Konoha and the shinobi world in your eyes? Well, if you phrase it that way. Guy was rendered speechless. When Kuroto noticed Guy was silent, he got up from his seat, came up to the window, and stated gently, I can tolerate these children cursing me for making their life tough, and I can accept these children cursing their trainers for being hard and unkind to them. But I can't accept these children dying in vain on the battlefields. These children are green, and they have yet to see the harshness of this world. But that day will come, and when it does, I want them to be prepared. I want these children to have strong minds so that they do not break. I don't want these kids to wind up like the majority of our friends. Guy's emotions shifted as he listened to Kuroto's reasoning. He's been through the dangers and sorrows that come with wars. He and his genin companions would have perished in the Third Great Shinobi War, if not for his father's sacrifice. You must constantly remember that we are all shinobi, and as shinobi, we will all travel to the battlefield at some point, Kuroto remarked calmly. If they can't endure even this small strain, it's better to be a civilian. I get it. Guy nodded seriously, then stood up and walked out of the meeting room, his face solemn. Watching Guy leave, Kuroto smiled lightly. A few days later, the Ninja Academy's new laws were promptly promulgated thanks to Kuroto's aggressive promotion. The trainees sobbed bloody tears as they read the notification, realizing that everyone was now in danger. Even the eldest Naruto has been diligently practicing the three-body techniques, which will be evaluated later this month. No one, including Naruto, wants to be the crane's tail in the eyes of the entire village. As a result, the daily pattern of challenging Sasuke on campus has dwindled, and the playground is no longer the same. At the same time, after some intellectual wrangling, Danzo finally agreed to Orochimaru's proposal and permitted him to carry out a complete transformation of his body. Danzo issued an invitation letter to the Amatsukami organization, inviting Homusubi to observe this transformation process, maybe to offset Orochimaru's presence. Kuroto, or rather Homusubi, naturally accepted the invitation after receiving it. He has long yearned for Orochimaru's human body modification technique, but he also understands that learning the essence of Orochimaru's body modification technique only by viewing the operation in real time is tough. Kuroto transferred his soul into the Homusubi clone and came to the root base on the day of the operation. After all of the preparations were finished, the remodeling work began right away. In addition to Danzo on the operating table and Orochimaru in charge of the procedure, there is also the Root's chief research officer, Uchiha Tsukihi, in her Homusubi guise, and 2 Danzo guards in this makeshift operating room. The presence of these bystanders appeared to have had no effect on Orochimaru's ability to operate the scalpel in his hand, as he skillfully controlled numerous surgical equipment and began the remodeling procedure. The fact that Danzo's physique is aged can't be denied. As a result, Danzo's physical metamorphosis should not be too drastic. Otherwise, given Danzo's physique, one would either die from a lack of control over the Hashirama cells or from organ failure. With this in mind, Orochimaru injected a huge amount of fusion fluid into Danzo, attempting to strengthen the union of the Hashirama cells and the Sharingan he had implanted in his body. Because his body will only be really strong when the Yang chakra of the Hashirama cells and the Yin chakra of the Sharingan he has implanted in his body are truly united. Although Orochimaru hasn't seen the stone tablet left by the Sage of Six Path in the Naka Shrine, this doesn't stop him from appreciating the significance of yin and yang harmony on the basis of chakra equilibrium. Ah! Danzo abruptly screamed in pain after receiving a heavy dose of fusion fluid. The 2 Danzo guards in the surgery room were anxious and glared at Orochimaru with homicidal intent. They were stopped by Homusubi. "Don't get worked up over it. That's a normal human reaction." Although Homusubi is unsure of Orochimaru's fusion fluid's exact composition, the fluid's purpose is to suppress the body's rejection reaction and speed up the merging of transplanted cells, flesh, and blood with the person. The human body's biological impulse is rejection. The body will naturally suffer some harm and discomfort if one's instincts are forced to be suppressed. This can't be avoided. It was, after all, a natural reaction. Danzo's crying gradually diminished over time, and his body changed as well. The portion of the body where the Hashirama cells were transplanted is the most noticeable. The creases on the surface of that hand have begun to fade, the skin has smoothed out, and the entire body appears to have aged several years. Tsukihi's everlasting kaleidoscope writing wheel eyes have been triggered under the mask of the flame pattern, and because of the eternal kaleidoscope writing wheel eyes, she can see all the small changes in Danzo's body. This is the power of creation of all things, and it can't be wrong. Homusubi sighed, clearly moved. Although Homusubi is unsure of Orochimaru's fusion fluid's exact composition, the fluid's purpose is to suppress the body's rejection reaction and speed up the merging of transplanted cells, flesh, and blood with the person. The human body's biological impulse is rejection. The body will naturally suffer some harm and discomfort if one's instincts are forced to be suppressed. This can't be avoided. It was, after all, a natural reaction. Danzo's crying gradually diminished over time, and his body changed as well. The portion of the body where the Hashirama cells were transplanted is the most noticeable. The creases on the surface of that hand have begun to fade, the skin has smoothed out, and the entire body appears to have aged several years. Tsukihi's everlasting kaleidoscope writing wheel eyes have been triggered under the mask of the flame pattern. And because of the eternal kaleidoscope writing wheel eyes, she can see all the small changes in Danzo's body. This is the power of creation of all things, and it can't be wrong. Homusubi sighed, clearly moved.